Alright, what's up you big shots? Thanks for clicking on this video. I know it's been a while since the last time I uploaded, but yeah, today we have the Gamdias Talos E3. Pretty exciting video. I've had this case for a little bit now, and I have a lot of information for you. The main question for this video is going to be, is it one that you should get for your build? After going back and forth with this case, this video should help you see what the building process is like using a case like the Talos E3. But before we go any further, let me know in the comment section below what case you currently have or you're planning on getting if you're gathering the parts. Comment down below. Alright, looking around this beast, you'll obviously notice the size, which fits micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards, but hold up, it also supports ATX motherboards, according to the Gamdias website. Not so sure about that. I have an ATX motherboard inside my Apollo M2 case, also from Gamdias, that I got a few years ago, and it doesn't seem like that'll fit in the Talos E3. I didn't get to try it because the motherboard we're going to be using in this video is a micro ATX motherboard, so it should fit perfectly fine. Looking even more into the Talos E3, you can immediately notice the quality. The white chassis with the tinted tempered glass, you know, kind of this white and black theme. That's just one of my favorite for things like cars and computers. It just looks great. The body is metal with tempered glass on the side and the front, and that's just going to look awesome with some RGB inside, which we will definitely have. We have the 4 screws on the corners, which aren't a problem, but I feel like more case manufacturers nowadays are making it easier to open the side of the case for quick service if needed. You know, maybe a light strip unsticks and you just need to open it and stick it back. You know, something simple like that. The case includes 3 pre-installed Rgb fans, which I'm sure are capable of cooling the components inside. However, I'll be replacing those with some white ASUS M2 120mm fans to make the PC look even better. Looking in the front here, we have a good size gap to allow air to travel through the case. Very good to have that. We'll have to see if it's enough. I think it should be. It's a pretty big gap, designed pretty well. I like how we get dust filters on the bottom and the top, but we don't get any dust filter on the front. That may be a problem in the long run, since we normally use the front fans for intake. We may get some dust bunnies over time, and it'll be interesting to see how that holds up with a radiator in the front, which, hint hint, I will be using. Input-output ports and the power button are up at the top to the side with an LED button for lighting control. Careful if you have a cat that likes to get on top of your computer. They will be able to push these buttons. Gamdias gave us some options on the hard drive bay placement. We can shift it to the side to make room for cables. That's always nice to have, and you can even remove the drive bay altogether. That could give you a bit more space to store any excess cables. The more I look at the Talos E3, the more it reminds me of something like the NZXT H510. They're very similar. All in all, so far so good. Let's build and see how that goes. Almost forgot to mention the specs for the PC. We have a Ryzen 5 5600G processor, a Gigabyte B550M DS3H AC Micro ATX motherboard, a 1TB SK Hynix Gold P31M.2 SSD, the AMD Radeon Pulse RX 6500 XT graphics card, and a 750W Redragon power supply that's fully modular. Now everything seemed to be fun and games, but this is where the trouble started, at least for me. I ran into a couple issues while building the PC, most of which had to do with the parts I was using, since I wanted to add a radiator and completely deck out the case with fans. This is also a good opportunity to showcase some other Gamdias products. We'll get to that. When installing the motherboard, you immediately notice that the main cable cutouts are blocked by the board right away. These will only work if you're using a mini ITX board. Luckily, we have other cutouts that are still able to run our cables. With that said, if you're using an ATX motherboard, it'll be very difficult to run cables through. So our motherboard is in with not much difficulty. I mean, it was easy to work around this. I have a 240mm radiator that I want to install. When trying to figure out how I wanted to orient it, it was not a matter of how I wanted it, it was a matter of what would work. And I was very close to just ditching the AIO altogether. Let me just say this real quick. If you're using an air cooler, like the one that comes included with the processor, you're good. You'll have no issues. If you're using a 120mm radiator, you'll also be perfectly fine. But if you're using a 240mm radiator, know that it won't fit up top because the width of the radiator with the fans is too thick for the case, and it will collide with most memory modules. My memory isn't super big and it gets in the way of the radiator, so I couldn't mount it up top. It just won't work. My only other option is to mount it in the front, and this will only work if you have the tubes up top because they'll collide with the graphics card if they're on the bottom. And that's not all. The screws to mount the radiator in the front did not work because either the included radiator screws are too thin or the gaps on the case are too thick. Personally, I think the gaps on the case are too thick because even some normal fan mounting screws go through the gaps. I had to really struggle to make this work, and it was frustrating for someone who's built quite a few PCs now. With all that said, I made it work after hours and quite frankly some days because I still have to go to work and stuff, so it took me a while. And we can move on to the fans. I really wanted to deck this PC out with white RGB fans, but only half of the ones I have were able to light up using the Gamdias fan controller. The LEDs on the others didn't work. That's not the case's fault, so I won't talk about it much, but the fans are from Gamdias, which isn't making the situation better. Once the build is complete and operating, it looks very good. You know, now that I think of it, it really wasn't that bad. It just took me a while. It's one of the best looking cases I've worked with. It's nice and compact and very elegant. At nighttime when it's dark and you have the fans or perhaps some light strips illuminating the insides, it looks wonderful, bright and clean. The build quality and feel is supreme. And since I don't have any fans up top, it looks really cool because from the top you could see the inside and the lights, I mean, it just looks really cool. I'll try to capture it as best as I can on video. It feels like only quality parts were used. When gaming and running intense tasks, the fans ramp up, but the case remains quiet because the metal and the tempered glass panels block out the sound. Just seeing it in my setup brings a tear to my eye. Which leads me to my final and most important question. Should you get it for your build? I pointed out a lot of negative things about the case, but that was just my experience with it, with the parts I used. If you're using an air cooler, you'll be perfectly fine. If you're using a 120mm radiator like the Gamdias Keone 120, you'll also be perfectly fine, and won't encounter any of the issues I had. The fan issue is probably just a bad batch of fans that I got, which is very unlikely. It's actually the first time that's happened to me. And the majority of PC owners don't have a 240mm radiator in their build, especially for one this size. And it's really not necessary in a build with these components. I just wanted to show off. Cable management was great, you get plenty of room. So if that sounds good to you, this is one hell of a case. Just looking at it right now, it looks really good. And that concludes my video. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, comment down below the case you're using right now or the one you plan on getting. And thanks for watching as always.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.